Hello and welcome to Last Week On, the podcast where we take our favorite TV shows, movies, books, video games, just anything, you name it, and we go back through it. My name is Adam Straughan, as you know by now, and again, I am joined on my journey through The Last of Us by the one and only Mr. Joey Dean. How are you doing, Joey?
Hello, everyone. I'm doing great. Sorry, it looked like an earthquake just hit my screen. I film these, obviously we're doing these through Zoom. My laptop screen is like so I don't know, it's just like it's not stable. So like anytime I move this desk, it makes me it's like that I don't know if you know that viral video of the girl who's putting on her makeup and there's an earthquake.
Yes, she's like
As I feel all the time when I'm filming. Yeah, I'm doing good. I put on something really special today in honor of this episode. For those people at home who can't see it, this is a scent that I got at the Renaissance Fair.
Oh, nice. I love
From
that.
an independent perfume cologne company. It's like a 3-generation family-owned business, and they make all their own scents, and they have so many. I know you're like remotely new to New York, but you should go to the Renaissance Fair in New York. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's called Zombies.
Nice. Perfect.
And I'm wearing it, and I totally forgot I had it. And I'm one of those weird people that I choose scents based on the colors I'm wearing, which is really weird. Also the weather outside, which I think is a little more common, but like this particular like scentscape, it feels very neutral to me. And so like I wear a lot of browns. And so I can't wear it when I'm wearing brown. Like I can't do it. So today I'm not wearing brown.
Cool.
And I can wear it. And so I was like, let's wear it in honor of infected humans who are like in the zombie genre, but like haven't been called zombies.
Yes, but hold on, let's backtrack for a second. So the scent's called Zombies, but what does it actually smell like?
You know, it's interesting. There's another scent I have. It's called Royal Night, and the woman explained to me when she made it, she felt like it would be the smell of a medieval castle when a knight would be creeping through the hallways at night.
Oh my God.
That was her description of what it smelled like.
I'm in.
Which is super cool. This she didn't give me as eloquent of a description on. It's like a little powdery. And I think a lot of these like apothecary, like homemade scents do have a powdery finish. Which is something like that sometimes I like and sometimes I really hate. But it's light. Yeah, it smells. It has like a touch of floral, maybe a touch of citrus, but it's like a little earthy, but in a non like mud earthy scent. Their scents feel very like, I don't know, they feel very natural. And I have three scents. And the third is called something bastard. And it's Jon Snow's faces on it.
I was just gonna say, is it linked to like Battle of the Bastards? That's incredible.
And that one is it's my absolute favorite scent by them. It's so freaking good. But yeah, New York Renaissance Fair. If anybody's around, the lovely woman who runs it is she's great. And she recognizes me in Corvix now because we go there every year to buy cologne.
Oh my God, I love that. I'm gonna have to go because I want to smell like a bastard of the undead. So I have to go there. But it's funny you mentioned that because like the video game Resident Evil, I remember they were doing a special like version of a game and they released it like a candle that they said was like zombie scented, and I never ever got to smell it, but I was like, what does that candle smell like? So maybe it smells like that, who knows?
I think it's this idea of like I would imagine she's coming from a more primal place with it, not so sci-fi fiction, but more like animated corpse. Like what would a dead body that comes back to life smell like if it smelled good?
I love that. Like Michael Jackson in the Thriller music video.
Yeah, that's how you smell like.
That's exactly what you smell like.
That's like the powder.
Your jacket like red just appears halfway through the video.
Yes.
That would be, I'd live for that. But yeah, so today, speaking of the undead, we are looking at The Last of Us episode 7, Left Behind. So another great episode, a predominant flashback episode here as well, kind of detached from the main narrative that we're at so far, but such a great episode.
Well, I'm sorry. Did you mean filler episode?
No, no, I'm not one of those people.
I had to make a comment.
I'm not one of those idiots online who says like, oh, why are we focusing on this filler? Why are we looking at this? This wasn't in the video game. It's like, did you play the video game? Do you know this is DLC? Do you know this is based on a comic that goes with the game? Shut up.
Not me getting into fights on Facebook over The Last of Us.
I wasn't going to mention that, but I love that you brought it up. That was fantastic. I love that you were defending it as well. It was great.
Oh,
but
God.
Yeah, on a sad note though, my my Ariana Grande notepad is gone. It's dead.
Oh
So the last
no.
episode we were recording, I'm just gonna plain blue one now. But the last
Ariana
one we were
Grande
recording,
dead.
I know, Grande ideas, Grande dead. But
You have no more
we
grand
I,
ideas.
God, I know. No more Grande ideas.
You're all out.
I know, nothing now, just blank pages
This
in
is going to be
here.
a really boring episode.
You're like, so what do you think, Joey? Um, but yeah, like I literally like had like 2 pages left in that book. So like on the last episode, I wrote them on the back of the pad, and I had like two separate pieces of paper and finished off my notes. So I was just like throwing paper in the air, and we were doing the last episode. But yeah, so now I'm back. That's all cohesive. It's all in here, and I'm good to go. So yeah,
Good.
like let's talk about this episode. So I think overall themes for me, what I got from this episode, there's kind of two major things that sit here. One of them is looking at the loss of childhood. So, we've got these two adolescents who are then moving into kind of adulthood, as it were. They're kind of going into that, the awkwardness of teenage years, leaving a lot of kind of innocence behind, which we've spoken about a lot as well. And the other one is choice. And Ellie's given a lot of choices through this episode, which I think are really interesting. But also, it's kind of in the flashback episode as well. It's like the choices of teenage life as well, and how sometimes when we were younger, you and I can probably relate, Joey, because we're not teenagers. But when we had those choices when we were kids, Christ, they felt like they were like the biggest things in the world. Like, as a teenager trying to make a choice, like it's like a Libra. Like, what am I gonna do? Like, it's so hard, right? And I say that because I'm dating a Libra. But yeah, it's just those are kind of the overall themes that I got from this episode. What about yourself?
Yeah, I think that we talked about this concept of loss of innocence earlier on, and or the death of innocence, and I do feel like that really, maybe this is the moment in Ellie's story in which she experiences that loss of innocence, or rather when that loss of innocence begins to unfold.
Yeah.
And we see it kind of unfold throughout her story with Joel, but I think this maybe is where it begins. I also think coming of age, just
Mm-hmm.
coming of age in general, with the whole 80s reference, 80s mall, 80s movie
Yeah.
montage, aha playing. Love that
Yes.
reference. But it felt very like quintessential 80s film, which are really fun coming of age stories. And also something that you and I can speak maybe more on, but the coming of age experience of a queer person,
Yes.
and the kind of the normal thing that like a younger girl might experience, looking in the mirror and saying like, am I pretty, do I look good? But on top of that, the layers of, I may or may not like what I'm developing into because it's
Yes.
counterintuitive to what is normal. And so I think there were some of those feelings thrown in there with the paired with the adolescence.
Mm-hmm.
And then also we've spoken about this a bunch, but I thought that like with the conversations of Fedra versus the Fireflies and having a more like youthful back end conversation, there was an exploration of that, who are the good guys and who are the bad guys conversation.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's fantastic. And obviously, we will dip into those themes as well as we go through and kind of signpost exactly what we're talking about, because there's very specific moments in this episode which really lean heavily into that. I mean, as well, what's really nice as well is this gives us more of an explanation of like when Joel and Ellie first met. You cast your mind back to episode 1 when they met in that corridor. Obviously, we saw them like separately before they came together, but they were both in mourning, right? So, like, Joel kind of still hasn't gotten over like the loss of Sarah. And then, now we've kind of gone back, we cast our minds back after watching this episode. Ellie was very much in that mindset of losing Riley. And you could see how kind of like they were, for all that they were both going through mourning, how different they were at that point, coming together and just not giving a shit about this other person. You compare that to now, especially the way the episode opens and how Ellie's like frantically like rushing around trying to help Joel. And it's the evolution of those characters coming together. Two people that were in severe mourning when they first met, and then through each other have helped to work each other through that without necessarily kind of pointing that out. And I think that's beautiful in that relationship development between them. But let's dive in. So the episode opens. It's a snowy town. It's kind of real. I love like the sense of like foreboding danger, and I think this episode does it really well, where we just see like a trail of blood going through the snow. Like we know what happened in the last episode, but we're in unfamiliar territory. We don't know where they are. There's so many questions that we have but don't need to be answered. Like, like Ellie's dragged Joel all the way along here. Like we see the horse tied up inside, which is a nice little reference back to what we said last episode, about, that horse should have been hidden. It should have been tied away because this wouldn't have happened. Maybe Ellie's learned from that and thought, I should tie this horse away so that that doesn't happen again. Like she's tearing rags up. She's like putting her hands like on the wound. She's trying to help Joel. And then it's interesting because Joel at this point has been the protector for Ellie. And now those roles have switched where Ellie's now the protector. It's really nice point as well when Joel's saying to her, just leave, go back to Tommy, just go. And like once he kind of shoves her off and the look they give each other without saying it is saying, I'm not leaving you. And the chemistry between them is fantastic. And it was a real nice kind of moment of this is where we're up to before we go back. But what's your thoughts on the opening, Joy?
I thought it was really moving, yet very simple.
Mm-hmm.
This episode had some more classic horror aspects to it.
Yeah, definitely.
That kind of slow burn anticipation. Just the idea of the infected being hinted toward way earlier than we see that engagement later in the episode. But having this opening really focus on the trail of blood and some of the things that you noted, I thought was setting up this. I don't want to say it wasn't necessarily so slow burn, but it had a very dragged out feel, and all of the camera angles and camera shots were very dragged out.
Yeah.
And I thought that was the most influential aspect of the intro. Obviously, we're continuing from where we left off, and there is so many questions about what's going to happen to Joel. Is he going to be okay? In my eyes, in my mind, why did he pull the knife out to begin with? The world may never know. I have no idea, but that's just me. And I think it's a nice gateway, and I thought it was a really successful moment for the writers to introduce this moment of trauma for Ellie, in which she's potentially experiencing the loss of someone she cares for, to bring us back into her history and tie us into the origin of why this is such a pivotal, important, meaningful moment for her, and why she is ready and willing to do whatever she needs to do to save Joel. And contrary to everyone who was saying it was filler, I think that it is so explorative and it's so meaningful to the storyline. And I think it added so much weight and so much meaning to her panic. I really liked it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head. We've always said that Last of Us is so much about characters more than anything else. Yes, I know the infected play a big part, but it's all about the characters within that infected world. And all of this literally goes back and explains, like, if you watch this episode and then start the series again, Ellie makes a lot more sense. Like up until this point, obviously you and I are gamers. We kind of understand the character of Ellie before the show even begins. But for people who haven't, as I said, to watch this episode, go back and watch it from the beginning, you'd think, oh my God, everything that this episode shows me is there. Why loss means so much to her. The previous episode, when she says, I've lost people too. Hello, we see what she's talking about in this episode. And that's why, without saying it, she's saying to Joel, I'm not going to lose you, when he pushes her off. And that's when she rushes out, and obviously she's not going to leave him. But we just understand Ellie so much more from this episode. And that's what's important about The Last of Us, getting to know these characters, especially when we get to the last episode, which we'll have a big discussion about the final decision in that episode. But yeah, it's integral to the whole piece. But then we go back. So we have a nice little flashback here where we see Ellie. She's in Fedra school. She's in the QZ. She's jogging around. She's got her Sony Walkman on. She's listening to All or None by Pearl Jam, which again, so important. Always look at lyrics in songs when they are used in The Last of Us. The lyrics in this is talking about being in a hopeless situation. I mean, hello, like it speaks for itself. She's stuck in the institution. She's stuck in the QZ. She's in a bit of a hopeless situation right now. Where are the prospects? And it's interesting when that comes into the conversation later on that she has with the captain as well. Now, obviously, she's running around. There's this bully that comes over, like snatches her Walkman off her head. And I kind of love, obviously, I believe it's the comic, it's actually Riley who steps in and like punches the bully. But I just kind of love that Ellie just smacked her one. I just love because it makes sense for the Ellie character. She is a bit like a firecracker. She doesn't take shit, and you see her all the time where she's telling people, like she's saying fuck you to people all the time. She shows them that, she will stand her ground when she has to. And I kind of love that she just did it, just whack. We then go inside of the captain's office, the principal's office, as it were. So this is the captain within Fedra. And I love that he says, like, oh, Bethany, after you hit her, needs 15 stitches. And Ellie's response is, good. I just love that. And And like, she's like, just put me in the hole again. Like, I know what you're going to do. And he's like, I'm not putting you in the hole again. I'm going to tell you the truth. And this is really interesting because we've spoke about truth before and, who you trust as well and what they're saying to you. But basically, this captain gives her two binary choices. He's like, okay, this is what you can do. This is number one. You act like a grunt. You live the life of a grunt. That's the life that you'll live. Interesting that he puts an empty cup in front of Ellie as well. I mean, if you want to go into kind of, I guess, the metaphor of like empty cup, people that, famously throughout history beg on the street have an empty cup. It's like that quality of life, if you want to kind of go into it that way. But the other thing as well is, the other choice when he puts the keys down, he's like, you swallow your pride, you follow the rules, you become an officer. And he's taunting her. He's like taunting her with this, saying, look, we live really good. Like in the wintertime, we're really warm. In the summertime, when we're nice and relaxed, we've got like a roof above our heads and like everything like this. And we kind of, when we think about that, we think about that's like a class system, right? That's what Fedra has. Like there's a class system where they are the ones who are better off. And look how that worked out in Kansas, how the people revolted against that. And it's nothing like Jackson. Like Jackson is the polar opposite of that, right? And it's just nice that in these little scenes here, we're getting so much references back to Ellie's character, but also other kind of realms of, possibilities that we see within this world.
I really enjoyed I felt like these opening two scenes set a really strong foundation for what to take away from the episode. So one of them being Ellie's character development. I thought the most meaningful part of that fight moment was not just that it shows Ellie is spunky, but that the bully says, your friend's not here to take care of it for you. And I think that we're watching Ellie's story of desiring power unfold throughout the show.
Yes.
And I think the idea that she hasn't always had that accessible to her, that she has needed people to defend her or protect her, and how Joel is that for her, and how Riley was that for her, is a scope into Ellie's intentions and her interest in wanting power. I think she has often felt powerless. Right. And so, but she's still spunky. She's still swung. 15 stitches. Go Ellie. And then there's also this conversation about who are the good guys, because this is such an exploration of, is Fedra actually not as bad as we think? Like, are they actually holding the world together? And is this system required in the apocalypse? Because what is the alternative? I mean, we saw what happened with Kathleen. It was a nice idea, but then the infected took over the city.
Right.
So like, even though people are being treated horribly, it still held the world together. Yeah. And Kathleen was also treating people pretty horribly. So it's like, what is the right action? What is the wrong action? So I thought that it was really a really nice setup here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those two ideas.
No, definitely. And I agree, especially with the power thing as well. When the officer even says to her, like, you can tell the Bethanys of the world where to shove it. And that's like a power offer right there. Like you will have that power to do that if you stay in line, if you follow the rules. And I like that Ellie kind of bites back and says, like, why do you care? And he says, like, oh, as you said there, Joey, we're the ones that are holding this together. There's a leader in you. And that line, we're the ones holding this together, is really interesting because Riley says that later on to her in reference to the Fireflies. And it's nice that she's given that kind of choice there of who is holding this together. And I really did like that reflection there. Obviously, Ellie chooses path 2. She chooses the keys. And obviously, she gets her Walkman back from the captain as well. We then go to the bedroom. So then we see the pun book, volume 1, up close. Ellie's reading the comic book in bed. This is obviously Savage Starlight comic. This is what Sam was reading with her as well before. So I really like the reference back to that. That was really sweet. I like as well. I mean, this is just Easter eggs galore. Like every time the camera pans around this room, I'll read out what I saw, but this is everything. Obviously, before that, she does look over and she sees an empty bed in her room. That's obviously reference to, somebody else shares that room with her. You and I, obviously, Joey, know that it's Riley, but up until this point, people that don't know, somebody hasn't come back, right? She's in there by herself. We look around the room. So we've got the Savage Starlight comic, obviously. We've got the Aha greatest hits as well as Ella James. I mean, Aha, we spoke about that before when Ellie sings Take On Me in the second game as well, but we do get that later on. We'll kind of explore Aha when that's played later on. We've got the Mortal Kombat poster up on the wall, which is obviously, way back in, I believe, was it episode 2 or episode 3? Episode 2. 3 when she references that. And then, we see them play it later on. We do have a picture of One-Eyed Lady as well, which I thought was quite interesting. I wasn't sure what the reference was there. But there's a few things. There's the lunar cycle poster as well, which we have, there's a few things we can talk about that. But obviously, Ellie's got like the space drawings on the wall, there's dinosaur drawings on the wall as well. And you can link it to that interest that she has in space. But also we can link that to other things as well, which we'll go into. But yeah, what did you spot in this bedroom, Joey?
Loved. Oh my gosh. So you kind of named everything. The Aha and Etta James thing I thought was so amazing that they were both of those artists were brought into the soundtrack of this episode.
Absolutely.
The dinosaurs, such an amazing fun reference that comes back in such a nice flashback in The Last of Us 2, as well as all of these sci-fi spaceship their spaceship drawings and all these really cool outer space things. I love the reference you brought up to the lunar, because not only is it the moon, but the lunar cycle or monthly cycle mirrors often the menstruation cycle, which there's such a focus on the coming of age experience of a young woman. And so same deal. This was Easter egg galore. I thought it was so fun to really pull back the curtain of who Ellie is and who she's always been. Like before she met Joel and before she was interested in these things on the road, we really see that this has been her story all along, and it makes her make so much sense, and it makes all those references throughout this first season of the show make sense. It makes the games make more sense. We just see who she's always been, what's always meant something important to her, and she's just such a nice pop culture mirror for the audience as well, because we also love that stuff, right? Dinosaurs, space, music, art. We're the audience we love video games, right? Like we love that stuff. We love that escape. And also that friction of past and future. I think the dinosaurs in space is such a nice theme that's been throughout this show. I thought it was great.
Yeah, I agree. And it's like, I love these character moments in any media when we get to kind of just take a breather with the character and we get to know who they are. And I think what a better way to do that is by, there's so many different forms of media where we start off with the stereotype of like a teenager in their bedroom. And when we look at their walls and what's up on their walls poster wise, that's telling us who that character is, like 100%. There's so many other video games, like Life is Strange does that all the time. There's like other big video games and like films, TV shows, anything with a teenage character, whenever you see them in their bedroom, their walls tell you who they are. And that exactly here links into that beautifully. Also, side note, I really love the moment in the flashback in the game when she's in the dinosaur museum and it's like putting the fedora on the different dinosaurs' heads. It's
so,
like so
funny.
It's like phenomenal. Especially some of them like kind of work it weirdly. I don't know how. But so then obviously from that we then get, we see somebody climb into the room. I love the lighting as well, like the red light coming in, like that sense of danger. We then see somebody climb into the room, kind of puts the hand over like Ellie's mouth, like kind of violently shakes her awake. I love that she kicks her off and her first instinct is to grab the knife, which is so Ellie. Like we've seen that before. Her first instinct is to grab that knife and defend herself. Obviously, we see that it's Riley, and she's like, what the fuck are you doing here? Like, where have you been? She's been gone for 3 weeks. She ran away. And she starts like this conversation's quite interesting when she says, look, I joined the Fireflies. And Ellie's complete disbelief. It's like, whoa, like, hold on a second. Like, that's who we're taught to fight against in Fedra School, and you've joined them. And then Riley's kind of saying to her, look, like, come with me for a few hours and have the best night of your life. Like, let me kind of explain everything. And Ellie obviously is a little bit hesitant at the start because, again, like that's going against like things of what she's been taught, but also this is her best friend. She's willing to put that trust in her because for all that she is her best friend, we start to get the seeds of there's more than that here. Like Ellie has more feelings for Riley than her just being a friend, especially in the little scenes when like, she's getting changed, but like she says to Riley, can you turn around, please? Like little things like that. Like she's got a crush on Riley. She doesn't want her to see her in this kind of state, right? And like we can relate with that straight away when we were younger, or even now when you're like, God, like I want to look my best for somebody. And just these little moments, we get them kind of dripped all the way through this episode until right at the very end as well, when obviously they come together and kiss. But yeah, I just love this little moment, this conversation between them and just establishing what Riley Steele is, who she is, and then she's going to take Ellie somewhere.
Yeah, that adolescent shame which I'm also going to express as queer shame.
Yes.
The idea of I don't want you to look at me while I'm changing. I often culturally at least, and this is the apocalypse, culture is a big question mark. What culture exists in the apocalypse that is any
Right.
bit familiar to today? But culturally, it's not uncommon for like little girls to like, or girls in general, go to the bathroom together or do that. Like men, it's there's more of like there's more rigidity with that behavior, whereas women are usually more fluid with that. And women, even like adult women, often I guess set that precedent because they don't really care so much, and so they share those parts of themselves a little more with other women. But I think the fact that Ellie is like, I feel weird, I think is not only that adolescent shame of like, my body is changing, I feel weird, I feel awkward, but it's also like I am gay or I'm queer or whatever, umbrella that she would fall beneath. And that she is maybe internally rejecting a bit of herself and she doesn't want to share that part of herself. And I and obviously she clearly has a crush, as you said.
Yeah.
And that's greatly impacting this conversation.
Yeah, massively. And then obviously we kind of see that it just builds further and further. Like we get scenes later on, like Ellie like sorting her hair out and stuff like that, and it continues to build in this in a very beautiful and organic way. And that's what I love about this so much. It's so natural and it's so true to life. And like when you were teenagers and you had those awkward crushes on people, especially those queer crushes as well, when you're like, you're in that position if you're not sure if this person before you, if they're queer, if they're not, if they feel the same, there's a lot further to question there, and it's really, really interesting. And this episode handles it beautifully. So then obviously, they climb out and they start to walk the streets. Obviously, Riley's taking Ellie to wherever this place is that's going to give her, this incredible night. And I really like this conversation they have as well. Riley tells her like not to try and fight everyone, to choose your battles. And that's a really, really interesting line. And like the learning that Ellie kind of gets from that later on is really integral for her character. Choose to battles when to engage, but also when not to engage. Especially the episode after this as well. I think there's a little bit that leaks into that as well, when to shoot and when not to shoot, which is a really interesting motive there. And then I love like Ellie's like, oh, did you learn that from from the Firefly University? Which again is really, really nice reference point. It's obviously her joking around, but it is stressing as well. Like she's kind of she's in a school right now. She's learning from Fedra. And it's like, so are you learning all this from Firefly University? Are they putting you through like an education system that goes against Fedra? But it was nice. It's just a nice little backwards and forwards between them. So obviously then they climb through the building, torches on. This is very game-like. You do this in the game very often. You climb kind of like through levels. You're kind of going up and down through buildings all the time, torches on. It's all from the game. But what's important here is that they find the dead body, right? So they're in this building. There's a dead body lying in the corridor. And like even Riley says like, whoa, he wasn't here yesterday. And it's that sense of where it's that teenage intrigue where like, at first they're a bit freaked, but then they get really close and they're like looking at his face and like, ew. But the important thing is they find obviously the drink, so it looks like bourbon that he's got there, and also the bag of pills. And straight away, this is, he's killed himself. He's taken an overdose and he's ended his own life. And that's really important for the very end of this episode when things have happened. And like they kind of like say to each other, we've got two choices here. We can either do it the quick way or we can just ride it out. This is the quick way, and it's a reference that where they've already had a taste of how this could look. And yeah, I just thought that was really integral for building up that character as well. And like the way that, what that choice can mean and how that can look, obviously before the body falls through the floor.
Yeah. The liquor moment I thought was cute because it was foreshadowed last episode. And when she drinks the whiskey or bourbon, whatever it is, and she says, yep, still gross. So I thought that was cute that they brought that back here. And I thought that the most interesting part of this wasn't just that it is a foreshadowing moment, which we've spoken about. This show just has a lovely way of doing.
Yeah.
But how desensitized they are to a dead body. They're just like, a normal person who's between the ages of 14 and 16 would be terrified seeing a dead man. But both of them are like, ooh, gross.
Yeah.
They're just so desensitized because of the world they live in. I also want to go quickly back and just talk about that one line because I wrote it down. You can't fight everything and everyone, that Riley says to Ellie. You can pick and choose what's important. Not only was this foreshadowing this season, but I think it's going to be foreshadowing future seasons. So I just want to throw that in there. It's subtle. But I thought that's what it made me think of. I was like, oh, okay. And then they go to the rooftop, obviously, which is the next bit where they actually drink the liquor. And
Yeah.
she says good, or she jokes, but she clearly hates it, which I thought was cute.
Yeah, nice little reference back. It's funny, I wrote that down as well. Like we get this reference to like Ellie before trying the drink in the previous episode and being like, yeah, still not for me. Or like when when she talks about coffee as well in that episode and says it smells like burnt shit. It's like this nice reoccurring joke with Ellie as well. Nice little point here as well that and this is the sense of power again with Ellie. How her interest is in power when she says, "Ooh, can I hold your gun?" Straight away, that's one of the questions that she asks to Riley. And Riley's like, "Oh, we really shouldn't do it," but like lets her hold it very, very briefly. And the look on Ellie's face when she looks down at that gun is like, "Oh, hello." And it's interesting because again, it's tasting that power, but also, we had this all the way through episodes when Ellie keeps asking Joel, "Can I have a gun? Can I get a gun?" Things would be easier if I had a gun. And you kind of see where that kind of the drips of that power is coming from now with Ellie, which is really, really interesting. It was really nice. And then again, she says to Riley, "Why did you join the Fireflies? Like, what is it all about? Why did you join?" And this is the point I mentioned earlier when Riley mirrors the captain's words when she says, "We're the ones that are holding this together." And that's interesting. That is, again, without directly posing choice, it's giving Ellie a choice. Who is holding this together? Do I join the Fireflies? Do I stick with Fedra? Who are the good guys here that I should join? And it's nice for her to hear that from different opposing people, from a captain high up in Fedra telling her that, and her best friend, whose opinion means probably more. And it was a really interesting point as well. She obviously explains that, oh, I was spotted by an older woman. She was impressed at me sneaking around. Like, she asked my thoughts on Fedra. And then, she said, oh, we should see them. I talked about seeing them being hung, which was an interesting point because when we were in Kansas City, that's exactly what we saw. People like Fedra agents being hung. And then, yeah, and she was like, oh, they invited me in. And, like they, as you said, Joey, they're on the rooftops. They start running across the rooftops. They're talking about propaganda bullshit from both Fedra and Fireflies, which I thought was quite interesting, like how they're both coming at it from different points. And that was quite interesting how, these are young kids as well who are moving into kind of, starting to progress out of childhood. They're talking about politics with like two kind of political groups, which was really interesting. Another sign of them moving on kind of out of their adolescence to a degree. There are moments when they dip back in, obviously, but it was nice to see these conversations happen. And then they're here. She says, we're here. There's the mall. That's where we're going. And it's nice because we think back to the conversation that, episode 2, when Ellie's talking to Tess and says, oh, like, I went inside the mall. And like Tess was like, you went inside the mall that's boarded up and like you should never go inside. It's full of like, infected. And this is the point where as soon as we see that mall, we know because we've had that point. We're like, oh, the mall, we know how deadly that is. And then obviously, yeah, she's like, well, they boarded it up, but they didn't board up every part of it. And Riley takes her to climb in.
Yeah. The next thing that happens, in which obviously the reveal of the mall and the lights coming on,
yes,
which was so like I just love the 80s moment. It reminds me of this. There's this specific experience I'm feeling, and even how you just said that without giving a choice, Ellie is given a choice. And I feel like in this episode, and maybe throughout the show at large, but in this episode specifically, like Ellie is the viewer's vantage point into this world, because the same way that we're learning this world, Ellie is as well. And things like seeing the dead body and then them coming up on the rooftop, and then Ellie says, "Is that the first dead body you ever saw?" It's interesting because my first thought was like, they're so desensitized to a dead body.
Yeah.
And then Ellie says essentially what the viewer is thinking. And then they go to the mall, and it's kind of the same thing where I was like, but the lights, like everyone's going to see these lights, this really bright, large building. And Ellie says, but the lights. And obviously Riley's like, it's boarded up. They can't see. So I think it was really, I don't know if it was intentional or if the writers are seeking to silence doubt in the storyline, but it's nice to have Ellie pull us into the narrative and give us answer the questions that we as viewers might be experiencing. And obviously we have the escalator aha moment, or aha comes on, and I love aha and I love this song, and I just love it in general, but obviously it's hugely important in the game, which we've spoken about already on the pod. But I just there's nothing better for me than an 80s movie mall montage moment.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, there wasn't necessarily a montage, but it was like basically that, where like everyone goes into the dressing room and tries on all these different outfits. I mean, it's such a fun space in cinema. And
Mm-hmm.
I loved that they captured that. I loved because it's such a coming of age, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's so
Yeah.
cute. Loved it.
It's beautiful. Like I love the moment those lights all flick on, like the colors in the mall. You're just like, oh my
Mm.
God, it's fantastic.
And so
It's
80s.
very neon, very 80s,
Yeah.
beautifully done. And as you said, like, Take on Me, like, I mean, 2 points. First of all, obviously, we've already said in the second game, Ellie does a beautiful acoustic cover of Take on Me, which is fantastic. But look at the lyrics, like I'll be gone in a day or two. And we've got Riley who's going to leave. I mean, it's perfectly placed. And that's why I always say whenever there's music in this show, pay attention to the lyrics, especially what you hear on screen at that time, because it matters. And it's beautiful foreshadowing for Riley then setting up that she's going to leave, right? Or wants to leave. Yep,
Hmm.
the escalator. Love all of this. Love, like, Ellie's like so blown away by it. Like there is kind of a nice little metaphorical point as well of when she's in the middle and she's walking backwards and she says, I'm not going anywhere. You kind of think of like where Ellie is right now. She said to Joel, I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying right here. She's kind of very fixed in where she is right now in the current narrative. And I thought that was a really interesting line to throw in there as a little bit of foreshadowing as well, that she doesn't want Riley to leave. She wants her to stay there with her as well. Just these little lines. It's like nice little foreshadowing with her literally walking, but not going anywhere on an escalator. I love the look of the mall. I love how empty it is. I love how abandoned it is. I love like the sign in the cinema back in 5 minutes. Like that was just perfect, perfect. And as well, the poster of Dawn of the Wolf 2 is in the video game. You come across that movie quite often. I love that reference as well, how it says it's playing that. But yeah, just the mall. I could talk about the mall forever, Joey.
Me too. I have a weird relationship with malls because where I am, there is this mall I used to love when I was a kid, and it was just like the coolest, but it was like such an old mall. So like when I was younger, it was like phasing out. The stores were
Right.
leaving, but there was really like there were three really fun places. One was Media Play, which I was like a big anime geek growing up, and so I would go
Love
to
that.
Media Play because they had a really great anime section, and then they also had a place called Got Game, which was really fun. Which
Nice.
before gaming live, like in your bedroom with Wi-Fi was a thing. I
Uh-huh.
would go there and you'd play things like Halo, and they'd have it all set up so you could just go there, and it was like we would like communities of kids would get together and play, and it was so much fun. And they had a place called HKT, which was like a Japanese anime store. So it was like my favorite place on the
Oh,
planet. But my
right.
memory of walking through the mall is that it was so desolate.
Mm,
Always. It felt post-apocalyptic. So when
right.
I think of malls, I often feel that. And now that we're experiencing this retail shift in America or maybe across the world, a lot of malls are feeling that way for me again.
Hmm.
And this brought me back into that space. And also growing up, I think our generation, there was some fun in malls. There was some, I was one of those arcade kids that would go to the mall and I'd hang out all day long and I'd play DDR on expert mode like a weirdo. And I was like one of those freaks. And not that, I say that with all the love in my heart because
Absolutely.
yes, very much freak. And this just felt so in my world and in my wheelhouse.
Hmm.
So, just to actually see them all in a post-apocalyptic space, and it to kind of be uh, uh, capturing the moment of that era in which like I was young, we were, teenagers at that point in our life.
Right.
And it was around the time the apocalypse happened in like the middle of the 2000s.
Hmm.
It just felt really nostalgic for me.
Yeah.
And I really liked the mall. And I thought the funniest bit was the Foot Locker bit. Like
Yeah.
why did nobody take soap? Oh, so
Yeah.
funny.
No, it was beautifully done. It kind of like there's a big mall in the northeast of England called the Metro Centre, which is like quite close to where like I am from. And yeah, like I used to go there as a child all the time. So obviously that's like my mall that I remember. It's huge. It's got like its cinema and everything like that, everything that a mall comes with. But what was interesting was during the pandemic, like I went to the Metro Center. It was like the only place that was open when we needed to get some stuff. And I went there with my mom, and like we went in, and it was weird. It was so militant. You had to go in, go to the one shop that was open in there, get what you needed, and leave. Obviously, it was very militant like that during the pandemic for obvious reasons. But walking around the Metro Center was exactly like this. Of course, there wasn't like overgrown stuff and mess everywhere, but it was just abandoned and one
Mm.
shop that was open. And it kind of brought me back to that. Like when I was like, I think I recorded videos as well, thinking like, I will never see this mall like this again, where there was nobody, all shutters down, all shops closed except one. And that just, it took me back to that. I was like, wow. And it was kind of a little bit, I guess, other people that watch this episode might feel that as well. When, like we're in New York right now, there's videos of like Times Square completely empty during the pandemic and things like that. So it was a weird reminder of that time, of how that was. And it was strange. And it just took me back to that, and talking about it as well. It was just blew my mind, man. But yeah, then they go to the lingerie shop and they're looking in the window. Joey, take
Mm.
us through this scene.
I think this was like the moment that it really confirmed that coming of age,
Absolutely.
and potentially queer shame, but
Mm-hmm.
also that hint that like when you have a crush on someone or like you have feelings toward them, you'll start to say things that like kind of push the boundary of what's acceptable.
Yep.
So Ellie, they're making fun of the lingerie and how it just doesn't make any sense. But then there's this
Mm-hmm.
awkward moment of like Riley saying, "Oh, I'm picturing you in lingerie, ha ha ha
Yeah.
ha." But it's almost like this, like, Ellie, who has feelings for Riley, is probably so uncomfortable in that moment because she's
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh no, you're thinking about me in this," like, and Ellie is immediately like, "Oh, I need to check to make sure what I look like because what do I look like in something like that? Like, am I attractive? Am I appealing to you?" And so that youthful like coming of age, especially the queer experience which obviously both of us have experienced, but not as a woman. It's a different feeling. There's a different emotion attached to it because there is so much shame paired with that. And I do find in the subtleties of their performance, Bella Ramsey's really capturing that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I thought this was really subtle and really, really it was like a cute young moment, but it was like, all right, this is the conversation. We're talking about adolescence here.
Yeah, 100%. It is that moving on to like, adulthood when we're looking at this type of lingerie. And like, as she said, like when she says, oh, I imagine you wearing that and laughing, it is that kind of, yeah, that weird shame, but also like, oh my God, I don't want my crush to be thinking about me like this. And it was nicely played, beautifully done. Again, like when Riley walks away for a second and like Ellie's like doing her hair, like, and the reflection, obviously the reflection of this type of place as well was just perfectly done. All of the metaphors right there. And it was really, really nicely done between them. Obviously, then Riley takes her hand. She's like, "Do you trust me?" Then, like, give me your hand, and takes her along, which is a really cute moment as well. And we get to the carousel. Now, obviously, this is from the game. Like, we've seen that. Like, this literally is in the game when they ride around on the carousel. And this is just super cute. All of this. I love that, they are having like a little bits of conversation as well. They talk about like liberating like the QZ together, and like, Ellie asks Riley to come back and all of that. But what's really important about this, it's just there's like almost a minute of them just looking at it, like Ellie looking at her. And that's beautiful. It's so cute. It's just really, really wonderful. Like just her looking at every time Riley turns her head, she kind of looks away as well. She just want to be caught like staring at her. But it's beautifully done. And as well, we hear some music playing on the carousel, which is the song Just Like Heaven by The Cure, which is again beautifully done. I know you love The Cure, Joey, but
I
again,
love
like,
that song.
I know, and like the lyrics though, I promise you, I'll run away with you. I mean, just beautiful. That music playing whilst Ellie's looking at Riley, knowing that she wants to be with her, knowing that they should be together and do whatever, their futures are together, was just beautifully done, right?
Oh, it was so sweet. And I just love the use of music in this show.
Mm,
I mean, it's just so, and I'm like, whoever is the like musical director or who makes these choices is just so on the nose.
hmm.
But to incorporate a song in a way that does not showcase the lyrics, yet the lyrics are still deeply meaningful. And
Yes.
obviously we learn 80s means danger. And so we
Yes.
have now two 80s, very famous 80s songs. And so it's such a hint. They're just the music, it's so good. And
Yeah.
obviously the Cure just, is such a meaningful band for me and
Yeah.
reminds me of my relationship because they're Corvix's one of Corvix's favorite bands. So it's like,
Absolutely.
the Cure has been, this song in particular has been such a romantic centerpiece in our relationship. And going on 80s cruises and like slow dancing together to this song, super cute. um yeah, if you didn't know we're gay, we are homosexual. But I thought also carousel, innocence, youth, fun, there's just so much, but there's also this image of carousels. I also thought that the carousel was such an amazing reference to innocence, but also the potential concept of madness and
Mm.
losing one's mind that they experience at the end of the episode, because it is used often as an imagery for both in literature. And it makes me think of stories like Catcher in the Rye, which have controversial storylines and were, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, that there was this undertone of madness paired with the carousel imagery in Catcher in the Rye. So I think that there's a literary vantage point here that's deeper and more explorative than just the fact that it's a youthful innocence that's explored with the carousel movement and fun, but that it's actually foreshadowing the end of the episode as well.
Yeah. No, beautifully done. And it is like, again, like it's that really interesting point that you brought there about spiraling, going round and like going round and repeating things again and again. It's like almost like it is that, but also like them two just going around together, just them two on that carousel, nobody else. And that, at the end of the episode, they say, let's just stay together. Like, don't leave. Let's just stay. Let's go around and do this together. And it's beautiful, like foreshadowing for that as well, which is fantastic. And it's just beautiful imagery. Like all of the horses, like again, it is like that adolescence to a degree, like them two just riding on there, but it's just beautiful, them looking at each other, and like I just loved it. I love this. And then obviously with the music playing behind as well, it's just chef's kiss. Riley starts saying, oh, like the captain was going to give me like my first assignment, like age 17 now, I was going to be put on sewerage detail. Cast your mind back to episode 1. That's what Joel was going to do. When he went up to the guy, the Federate agent, he was like, what do you want me to do next? Obviously, after he's dumping the bodies. And he was like, oh, we've got some work in sewerage detail. And it makes you think, like, could Riley have potentially been guarding Joel? Had she lived through this? It's a nice little point of where, had Riley stayed in the Federal school, she could have been there, like, with Joel. Who knows? And I thought that was a really nice, interesting point of, obviously, when we find out how this episode ends, that was never going to happen, but it was just an interesting point, but also why Riley left, because she was like, I didn't want to do that. Like, that's not what I want to do at all. I want some sense of freedom. And obviously she thinks the Fireflies is what could give her that, right?
Yeah, there's this conversation always, this friction of past and future. We see it with the kind of dinosaur versus space imagery in the beginning of the episode, and that the interest of Ellie that is defined by those two really major things. There's just these deep explorations in the game of dinosaurs and space, past and future, but also the conversation of the idyllic future we spoke about last episode, and like what is possible for the future and how can we maintain our humanity and still have goals and dreams and aspirations in a world in which that isn't necessarily what exists anymore. And I think that Riley she's fishing for purpose. She's fishing for meaning. She is someone who wants more. And so she was, a good target for Marlene. But I also wonder now that, more of we've seen the finale of the show. I wonder if Marlene scooped up Riley because she realized how adventurous Riley was and wanted to keep Ellie safe and away from Riley.
Yeah.
I wonder. But obviously because then Riley later speaks that she asks if Ellie can come, and Marlene says no. Why would Marlene turn down help? Obviously she knows who Ellie is, but
right.
Regardless, I felt like this was a really nice kind of it grounds Riley's character in realism and humanity, and it also is that coming of age experience, like getting older and what do we want our lives to become, and that's what the both of them are experiencing right now.
Yeah, and I thought of the future, like, and then as we said, like, go back to the captain, like he was giving Ellie this choice of what you want your future to look like. And it is those things we get these as teenagers when we go through school all the time. You've got to do these things, like you've got to get your grades, get your degrees, all of this for your future. And it's nice that she's taking ownership in that and saying, I don't want to do that shit, and she's like going with her purpose of what she believes is right for her. And I love this line as well, where Riley says to her, like, you're the one thing I missed from that place, if that makes a difference. And Ellie says, like, a little. But it's just a nice little kind of, there is something there. There's something there that we're starting to explore, this like relationship between them. And it was just really, really nicely done. I just love that as well. And she's like, a little. And then, yeah, we've now got 3 wonders left to go. So we've done kind of 2. And then we've got 3. And then she kind of nods over to the photo booth. I love Ellie is like, is that a time machine? Like, just again, always asking things like this, which I love. So then they go into the photo booth. Obviously, Riley came prepared, like, because they need money to get the photos developed. And like, she has the $5 and she says, I was waiting to do this with you. And I thought, again, that was a really, really nice line. Ellie's smile as well when she says that is just beautiful. Like, it's that, oh, like the person I really like wants to spend time with me. That's what that smile was. And it was beautiful to see that. And then the poses that they do are literally from the game, like the back to back, like looking like creatures, like all of this. It's very sweet. It's very close. You kind of see, like, as well, like Ellie's kind of side eyeing her while they're taking the photos. But I like as well that when the photos develop, they're like faded, right? They're kind of like white. And again, like if you look into that, it's like these are memories of childhood that are starting to fade. Like they're fading now out of this childhood. Beautiful metaphor of like when we think about memories like within this world and how faded they can become, we think about the past world, how things used to be, that's now faded, that's now gone because we're in this new reality. I thought that was just a really nice moment within the photo booth. It was just stunning.
Yeah, and that the one picture that is most visible is them as monsters,
Yes.
which is it's this idea that they can't exist because this is, they're bound to this experience. This is a flashback, obviously, but it's a foreshadowing that they're going to turn into monsters, which brings us back to that wolf poster we see in the beginning. And a nice detail that was added, subtle, but when the wolf poster is in the foreground, the movie poster, and the movie theater's in the background, you can't actually see any other movie title. So the focal point is only on a werewolf, a creature that turns into something, a human that turns into a monster. And then again, we have this humans turning into monsters in a photo, which is meant as a joke, but is once again foreshadowing. And then obviously they put on the Halloween masks as well, which is that third reference to it. I also really enjoyed the way that they acted in the beginning of like, oh no, 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 it's happening, because we literally always do that. And the last time I was in a photo booth, I was with you. We went out, and
Yes.
I wasn't in the photo booth with you, but I was with my two friends, and we all did that experience. I don't know if you and your partner did that, but we were
Yeah.
very much like, oh my god, it's starting. Wait, we have to pose. What are we doing? And it's such a cute, realistic approach to this. I thought it was really charming, and I was like,
Mm.
yep, been there, done that so many times. Every time I'm in a photo booth, that happens.
Yeah, and a beautiful point you made there is about the werewolf. That was really, really great point
Mhm.
about like we see it in the poster as well. Take us back to the lunar cycle poster. Werewolves come out as well in the
Yes.
full moon. I thought it's like kind of
Yes.
connecting these dots as well, which was beautiful. And
Love
obviously,
that.
as you
Didn't even think
said,
about that.
yeah, it just kind of came to me when we were talking about it there. But as well, like, and then where this leads to with obviously Ellie putting on a werewolf mask as well at the end. Beautiful point. But yeah, it is that awkwardness when you're in the photo booth every single time. The first thing you do is like, oh my God, is it going to take? And like your first kind of picture that comes out is just you kind of looking like what
Yeah.
are we doing? And then you're like, okay, like how long do we get? Like, let's just pause, do it. And that's exactly what you do. It was really, really fun. I really liked it. All right, then they go to the arcades and just take us through this, Joey. What happens when they go inside this
I mean,
incredible arcade?
I was living my life because, like I already have said here, I was one of those arcade kids. I had friends that worked in the arcade, and they would open, similar to how they took coins from the machine, they would open the bottom part where the coin would be in, and they just flick it so that I would get like
Yes.
1,000 credits to play, and I would just literally do that all day playing for free. Which is why I became so maniacally good at the DDR, Dance Dance Revolution, really wild. But
Love that.
anyway, um, they they walk into Raj's arcade, which is literally exactly taken, essentially a sticker from the game.
Yep.
It's identical, and I know the term Raja means king. If it
Mm.
has an H at the end, I don't know if that has any reference here, but I just thought it was an interesting name to choose. It's in, I believe, in India. I don't know exactly what like the language origin would be, but it means Raja, and I know that because the drag queen Raja, and and they just walk through this really like 80s-esque moment through
Mm.
these arcade games, just like intimately touching and looking at everything. Ellie is
Gorgeous.
so in awe, and I genuinely feel that way when I enter arcades. They're one of my favorite places to be.
Mm.
They're so joyous. They're so nostalgic, and they're so much fun. And I think they really captured that energy with the direction of this episode. I loved it. But eventually they come up to both the thing that was referenced in the beginning of episode 3 when they go to the Cumberland Farms, but
Yep.
also the Mortal Kombat poster on Ellie's wall. We appear, the surprise, the wonder isn't just the arcade, but it is the Mortal Kombat game, Mortal Kombat 2. And in the third game specifically, I'm sorry, in the third episode specifically, the third game, I wish we had a third game. In the third episode specifically, Ellie tells Joel about Melina, who swallows somebody whole and spits their bones out, which I thought was interesting because that is what the infected do. Essentially, they like eat people. And I thought that they start playing, and I thought that the character choices were really interesting because Melina is chosen by Riley, and Melina consumes people. And the infected consume people, obviously foreshadowing the end. But Ellie chooses Raiden, who is this like god of thunder, god of the skies. And Ellie is talking about, throughout the whole show so far, how much she loves the idea of space and being in the sky. And she's jealous of Joel because he was in a plane. So I thought that was such an interesting, smart choice. Really, really, really great way to showcase that. Another little funny note here, when Ellie sees all the dollar bills on the floor and she says, not that useless shit.
Yeah.
Which I thought was just such a nice commentary to today, because it really does just prove the point that money is just paper.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved this scene. Like, for me, it was that nostalgia of like, going to arcade game. Like, there's still arcades now. Like, even at the Metro Center I mentioned before, there's like a big arcade section, and it always gets played. And then we've got like, what's it called here, Joe? Is it Dave and Buster's? Is that what it's called here?
Yeah.
I went there for the first time.
I love Dave and Buster's.
I went there for the first time a couple of weeks ago, like with my partner, and I was just like, this is my jam. Like, and it was so busy. Like, I couldn't believe how busy it is. Like the games and that people play, and like they want to win the tickets to buy the things. And I was like, I'm all in. And we got our damn things. That's what we did.
I love that.
They're actually right here as well.
Oh my God, I love them.
So it was like all Pokemon stuff. But
oh my
it was
gosh,
just
the best.
It was fun. It was so fun. And I get that, it's just, I loved it. Like, even the nostalgia of like, Mortal Kombat. I remember playing that when I was their age, and just loved it. And like, and she's kind of explaining like, how do I control this character? What do I do? How do I do the fatality as well? And like, you have to press the buttons in a certain combo, and just all of that I absolutely loved. One little moment as well I liked is like, they walk past the pinball machine called Attack on Mars, and it's actually saying that the Earth has been invaded, which I thought was a really interesting point as well.
I wrote that down as well.
Loved that as well. Pinball machines were massive back in the day as well, and still kind of are, I guess, to a degree. But I like as well that when the camera starts to pan out on them having fun, it's it's the looming danger. And we go back to like the very start of the episode, and we had these long, as you said, Joey, lingering shots going to something potential danger. And this I loved, where we zoom out on them, we start to go towards it. This is horror movie 101, where we're going into something, another part now. It looks dark. It looks like, something of danger. It's ominous. And then it's just as the camera pans around the corner and we see the infected laying on the ground, and then it just jerks awake. Oh, it's like foreboding. I loved that so much. Beautifully done.
This episode particularly reminded me of, I believe it's season 3 of Stranger Things, I think. And this felt very like Vecna to me, this moment. But I think it's season 3. I could be mistaken. I think it's season 3 where they're like in the mall a lot. They're like in this like 80s-esque mall. And this episode really gave me that energy. But I think that's just because it's the most recent contemporary adaptation of that 80s feel mall vibe, which was such a big thing in that age of cinema. I also really enjoyed that this reveal, we love a good reveal, that this reveal was in a doll store for two reasons. The emphasis on youth, the emphasis on childhood, and kind of the desecration of that space, but also that dolls are anthropomorphic figures that are soulless or without life. And that is essentially what the infected is embodying, dead people. So dolls aren't necessarily dead, the good kind are, but the idea of anthropomorphic empty body being occupied by something else, I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's like, it is that double meaning where, like kids, like especially young girls, like, it's kind of like, that's the toy that they have. It's like that generation of like moving into like adulthood, like talking about babies and everything like that. And, it is obviously that absolutely like these two young teenage girls that are starting to leave that behind now, like, starting to become young adults. But also that, yeah, Joey, as you said, beautifully said, where that's exactly what the infected does with us. It kind of strips out anything that we know of ourselves and we just become like these kind of empty shells. And that was a beautiful, beautiful point there. It was really, really nicely put. And then obviously we cut back to Ellie and Riley. And then Ellie kind of catches up on herself here. She's a little bit when she's like, okay, like I've got to go back to Fedra. I've got like drills in the morning. I have to get up in like 2 hours and like make my bed. She's probably thinking like, where am I carried now with like Riley? Like what is going on? There's probably a lot going on in her mind right now. She's not really sure how committed she is to the idea of like her and Riley being a thing. The fact that she's got these responsibilities she needs to get back to as well. And this is weird, like where it's like almost like the adult side and like Ellie coming out, these responsibilities that we have to do as adults to think about them. She's like, I need to go back and do this. And then Riley's like, well, okay, but I do have a gift for you. And she's like, well, I can obviously stay for a gift. And then this is really interesting. Like, I really like when we lead into this next scene because it's like there's a lot of joy, but also the whole mood switches completely. It's just when something happens here. So Riley obviously leads her behind the taco, like fast food restaurant stand. I love that she says, like, are we having tacos? And she like, looks at her as if to say, like, do you think we're going to have tacos right now? Takes her into the back. Obviously, that's where Riley's been camping out. We see like the sleeping bag and like little bits around there as well. And when Riley spins around, she's like, I've got you this. And she's like, ta-da. Like, this is literally from the game. Ta-da. And like shows her like the Puns book volume 2. So obviously Ellie has volume 1. This is volume 2. And she's like, I didn't know they made a volume 2. This line I loved when she tells like, the joke of like, how does a computer get drunk? It takes screenshots. And they're like, what screenshots? Love that. Loved it. Because that's exactly what they would do. They're not used to that. They don't know what screenshots are. I just thought that was hilarious.
So cute. I love that the first joke reference was by a frustrated cannibal. About a frustrated cannibal. Nice Easter egg there. If there's one thing about me, it's that my sense of humor is complete shit. It is horrible. And I think the stupidest, daddiest of jokes are the best. And this whole pun conversation that's been going on for so long, my favorite. I made that sound a little naughty, daddiest of jokes. Oh, maybe my sense of humor isn't so bad. So as soon as she said, what do you call an alligator in a vest? And they didn't answer it, I turned to Corvix and I said, a croc-argyle. Which is probably the answer because and I was like, oh, I get this. This is my
jam.
Stupid sense of humor. My bandmate is the worst, best dad joker in the world. And nice. I like completely bond with him over it because I'm like, all these jokes are brilliant, but they're the stupidest I've ever heard in my life. And so much so that I bought him a dad jokes book one year for Christmas. So this like pun book exchange thing is something that I actually have lived through.
Love that. Love it. It's like massive on TikTok as well, where like people just make videos of like reading out dad jokes and laughing to them. And I get lost in them because like them reacting to them in the way that they do like gets me laughing. And I'm kind of like that. It's like when someone has an infectious laugh, I'm just sucked in and I start laughing. Even if I don't know the pun, I just start laughing. But like those videos I've lost time to online just from like watching them laughing at dad jokes.
They're the best. I love a good stupid joke.
Same. And then when they're all paired up and lined up together, like hours of laughter, literally. Obviously, they're giggling, they're laughing together. It's kind of very kind of adolescent laughing here. But then the mood completely changes here. When Ellie finds this, it very much looks like a pipe bomb. And she like looks and like gives it to Riley and she's like, did you make these? And she's having none of it. And she's like, what the fuck? Like literally. And she says, she's like, you didn't just find this place. The Fireflies posted you here, didn't they, to guard this stash? That's why you were here. You didn't just find this. And Ellie is pissed. Like, and this whole conversation kind of happens in the game as well, where, she's saying, what, so you think like the Fireflies would use these on us, would use us in the QZ, so effectively you would be throwing these at me? That's what you'd be doing? And this is all lifted from the game. And Ellie's kind of rightfully pissed here, like, she's like, I thought like, all of this wasn't about me. This was never about me, and she's like, she's annoyed. She's like really upset the thought of like her friend would one, hide that from her, and two, is taking this new post within the Fireflies and then would be ready to throw like bombs at her essentially. She's like, whoa, like all of this thing was never about me. And then obviously goes to storm off as well, and is really, really hurt and is like really aggravated. But I love like, I love like the pushing over of the bin, everything like that. But I like as well that Ellie gets to the point of when she looks like she's just about to leave and like is obviously upset. There's a tear rolls down her cheek and stops and just thinks, oh, because Riley still means so much to her. And like kind of again, weirdly swallows that pride and then wipes the tear off, turns around and goes back to see her. But that argument I thought was played so beautifully.
Yeah, there is in underneath the umbrella of the good versus bad and who are the good guys and who are the bad guys, which is just such a common thread throughout the show. There's also this idea of action and choice behind philosophical standpoint, and the idea that like as they're coming into adulthood, it's like the idea of being a firefly is cute, but
Mm-hmm.
then the reality of it is you have to make tough choices and kill people. And it's the same thing with Fedra. Like the idea of a good future with Fedra is cute, but you still have to hang and, you know, pillage and be fascists. So
Mm-hmm.
there's this idea of philosophical standpoint and like the reality behind that philosophical standpoint that things aren't what they seem or things are different than what they seem, which obviously brings us back to the idea of these puns as like there's a double meaning to everything. Nothing is
Right.
means one thing. Everything is more complicated than it seems. And then there's that the part of the episode that really sparked my interest with the idea of Marlene and
Yes.
Riley saying she asked Marlene if Ellie could join, and she said no. And then I was like, oh, I wonder if Marlene's protecting
Mm-hmm.
Ellie.
Right.
And she realizes because I'm like, Marlene saw this little girl sneaking around, and she
Yeah.
was like, you join. It just felt more like she was trying to pull her away from Ellie
Yeah.
and to
Massively.
protect Ellie because um I don't know if it's just the idea that like having people you care about makes you vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
or it's the idea that Riley was clearly adventurous, sneaking around. Like there was something about her that could get Ellie into trouble.
Right.
And Marlene was tasked to protect Ellie. And at this point, she doesn't know that Ellie is immune.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so she just thinks she's just a normal person she has to protect.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that interesting. I found that interesting for sure.
Yeah. And obviously we get the big the reveal here when Riley says, like, I'm leaving and I want you to come with me. And obviously that's when she says, like, I asked Marlene, she said no, but I still want you to come as well. And she kind of says, like, tonight is my last night. And she obviously wanted that to be with she wanted to see Ellie before she leaves and say goodbye. And again, it is kind of, as you said, Joey, it's tying a lot of strings together here. Like Marlene's involvement when we go right back to episode 1 when she's talking to Ellie. When we then look at the very last episode and we see Marlene as well there and kind of literally taking Ellie like as a baby. Like all of this is starting to come together now, and we're like, oh, right, okay, yeah. So it is the promise that she made to Ellie's mother. Yeah, it's just all of this protection. And like, there's a lot going on in Ellie's mind right now. The fact she's like, oh my God, I thought my best friend brought me here. I thought we had a thing. She's asking me to leave with her. Obviously, that's not going to happen. She's doing this like with the Fireflies. She's going to like throw bombs at us. Oh my God. And obviously storms off. And that's like, I still love, as I said earlier, like I love that she comes back and like as wipes the tear off. And then we hear like this scream and she thinks, oh my God, like Riley's in trouble. She's running through, running through, running through. And obviously she's inside of this Halloween fancy dress, like costume type shop. This is what I was alluding to before, like the wearing of masks, the wearing of a costume. This is very much a queer identity coming forward here. How, you and I, Joe, can probably speak to this a little bit more, but where, as queer people, you feel like for such a long time, you have to wear a different identity. You have to wear a costume or a mask to hide what is underneath that from the world or for whatever your experience is. And it's the taking off of that mask that's so important within that life. Like once you find the strength and find the opportunity to take off that mask and show your real, authentic self underneath, that's what the metaphor is here. We kind of get that later on as well, where literally the point when they take their masks off is the point that they kiss each other. It's like, it's the realness, it's them displaying themselves to each other as who they are. And I just thought that metaphor was wonderfully played. Of course, this happens in the video game, but I think the whole point of in the video game and in the TV show, that's what sits there. That's the substance of this and speaks to that queer narrative.
Exactly. And I actually find the flip side to also be true. So obviously we wear masks, we take them off as we become more comfortable in our skin. But a lot of times in the queer community, putting on a mask makes people feel more themselves. So when they put on the masks, they're able to truly joyously celebrate and detach themselves from the restrictions of their reality. And not to make this a political conversation, but obviously there's a lot of conversation around drag right now. And but
Yeah.
drag is often that vantage point for a lot of queer people, in which putting on this character or this mask allows people to really unlock this accessibility to empowerment and self-empowerment that they have in them all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
so there is this really interesting conversation with mask wearing and putting it on and taking it off, and what that gives us access to as queer people who feel like we aren't able to, or rather we have to develop some sense of self to be more authentically open and in tune and in touch with what is innate and what is natural to us. So I love that point. And Halloween is, I call it queer Christmas. It's
Yeah.
queer Christmas. Queer
Yeah.
people love Halloween because dressing up. I mean, we queer people love horror. Queer people love anime. Queer people
Mm-hmm.
love superhero books and movies and comic books, and we love escape. We love escapism. We like video games. Like, we are really drawn into and I think that's why The Last of Us is such a moving and at times very queer centric story. Like, some of the
Mm-hmm.
central characters in The Last of Us are queer, down to The Last of Us 2 having a trans character in it. And there's just so many queer identities strewn throughout. And I think it's because we are so innately connected to this horror genre. We're so innately connected to this gamer genre, this comic book genre. And so I do think that's a really great point. The kind of Halloween access and removal and all that stuff. And
Mm.
obviously this is when Etta James is played and she's singing "I
Yes.
Got You, Babe," which I thought was such a
Oh,
nice pullback to the beginning of the episode. It was
I
just really,
mean,
this moment was great.
wonderful. I mean, like, the lyrics in that song as well, saying like, we don't know a lot about the world, but I've got you, and that's the lyrics,
Mm.
and like them two dancing together as well, just further highlights that as well. But yeah, I mean, great point that you made there, Joey, as well, about like, queer people putting on masks as well. And I guess like in a way, Ellie's always had this sense and this intrigue about feeling powerful, right? Wanting that power. And, like you and I have watched Drag Race. We've seen when queens have said, like, when I'm in drag, I feel powerful. And I think it is that essence of how powerful we feel and how, engaged and kind of, vitalized in a sense that we feel like when Halloween, when we do wear the masks and the costumes, or like when drag queens get dressed up and how powerful they feel, they command the room. And I find that so fascinating. And again, I think that's kind of the future of where this, character Ellie goes to in the second game. But just definitely here, I think it sits within the point of where, as queer people, as young queer people as well, discovering who we are, it is finding that strength to take the mask off initially before then knowing when you have the confidence and the strength and what it means to put the mask back on and what that means for you. And it's a different mask that you put back on compared to what you took off. And I love this here. I think it's so powerful and it's beautifully done. When Riley's saying, like, I wanted to join somewhere where, I had a family where I feel like I mattered. And Ellie says, you mattered to me first. Beautiful line. Beautiful. And she's like, you're my best friend and I'll miss you when I'm gone. And like Ellie's face, how upset she looks as well. It's like heartbreaking. And it's just, it builds up to this point, like as I say, they're dancing. They've got Ellie's got the werewolf mask on, like Riley's got the clown mask on. They're dancing together, having fun. I Got You, Babe is literally playing, which is like gorgeous. And then obviously the iconic moment, which is from the video game as well. Like they take the masks off, they look at each other, and then the kiss, which is it's just wonderful. It's so nicely played. Like all smiles, all the love, and then Ellie just says, "Don't go." And then Riley smiles and says, okay. Just, like it's an arrow to the heart, man. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, the way that they built up this tension in character development throughout the episode leading up to this was beautiful. I thought
Mm-hmm.
it was so subtle, and there was that friction of, if you're watching and you're not familiar with the game, you're like, are they just friends?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously that those walls are taken down in this moment. It was beautiful, it was stunning. I thought this episode as a whole was just so moving, and obviously like what's about to happen really like tugs at the heartstrings with this.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, and I also really liked what you just said about the idea of family and chosen family, and like how that is also a very queer experience. And so
Yes.
I think that there is a lot of queer, like contemporary queer isms that are pulled into this part of
Mm-hmm.
this episode, but also into this part of Ellie's journey and Riley's journey, because I mean, we're also learning that Riley, we're seeing more Ellie's vantage point, but Riley's also not straight
And
about
we're
both of their experiences.
absolutely having them together as well, which is like wonderful. The fact that, again, we talk about like how people within this world kind of found each other. We mirror like Bill and Frank, how they came together as a product of this world. And then we get that kind of mirroring of this with, again, two queer characters, Ellie and Riley. And I just love that. It's just beautifully played. But as you said, suddenly we're kind of taken out of this moment because we hear a noise. And we know what's going to happen here because we had, the prelude of this, of like, this creature waking up and then suddenly the infected bursts in. Now, obviously, in the video game, there's a lot of infected. This section goes on for a lot longer. But what I liked here is that it's just the one infected, but the danger of that infected and what that can mean. And I kind of love this fight. I found it really scrappy, really messy, like kind of like throwing around in the shop, like Ellie kind of stabbing it in the side with a knife, and then like Riley kind of whacking it as well with like this piece of metal that she's got. I loved how scrappy it was. But again, that moment of Ellie kind of like, when it's on top and she just grabs it and goes to run to save Riley and just stabs it in the head as well. And it was beautifully played. Again, like we've seen Ellie do this before when episode 3, I think it was, when she kind of stabbed, the creature in the head as well, but very slowly. And again, she kind of knows what that feels like because she's done that here as like a hero move, a power move again.
I think that it was intentional that the writers added the Mortal Kombat game into the Cumberland Farms in episode 3, and that is exactly where this happens, because there is it's a weird moment when Ellie goes into the basement and she finds the tampons, i.e. coming of age.
Yep.
There's a lot of through lines with that space and the space of this episode. And Ellie, and I remember we spoke about it on episode 3, but it was like a little, I was questioning a little bit, like, why did she do that? Was it to feel power?
Yeah.
And this episode brings clarity to that. She did it as revenge.
Yeah.
And revenge is something we will learn really integral to Ellie's character. So that is a bit of an Easter egg that's being dropped. But Ellie is pissed, like she's pissed off. This isolated, alone, infected took her friend, or her potential love interest or partner. And I think now episode 3 makes a lot more sense. And I think the tampons and the Mortal Kombat game both being in that space, bringing in major themes and literal things that were from this episode, I think are really tying that idea and bringing it full circle.
And really building the foundation of that Ellie character, as you said, going into the second game, which is so driven by revenge. Like, oh my God. Yeah. So, beautifully done then. Again, it does tie those two little, for what we thought was like, a smaller scene in that episode, really, that was important, has a different type of importance now when we connect it to this moment and what was actually going through Ellie's mind at that point as well. Beautifully ties them together. Obviously, we find out Ellie's been bitten on the arm, as we already know, because we see that mark on her arm kind of through the show. And
that
obviously,
moment,
when she's like rubbing her arm.
That moment, and the moment that Henry shoots himself. Bella Ramsey. I mean, those were the two most moving moments of the whole show for me so far. Just Bella Ramsey's reactions, emotional responses, and what was it like? It shook my soul. Oh,
yeah, absolutely. Like we said as well, like in that moment when obviously Henry shot Sam, and we didn't see it, we just saw like Bella Ramsey's face, and that's what you need. And that just speaks to the actress that Bella Ramsey is. Like just the performance that they were able to give in doing that, like the facial expression alone, like Ellie scratching at her arm, like no, and then like looks over and then sees Riley's got her hand bit, is just beautifully played, right? Like beautifully played. We obviously get a little flashback as well where we go back to Joel. He's kind of laying like cold and alone on the mattress. Ellie's upstairs. She's kind of rummaging around looking for supplies, which, hello, video gamers, you do that all the way through the games. You're opening drawers and everything looking for supplies. A nice little moment for that. And then we kind of cut back to this where, Ellie's pissed off, rightfully so. It's a very teenage reaction, like smashing all of the glass on the counter where they were just dancing as well. Like full rage. Riley's kind of sitting more calmly with the gun. And then this is when she says, right, we've got two options here. We can take the easy way out. And like obviously hinting towards the gun, saying it's quick, it's painless. Obviously, this is referencing back to when we saw the dead body earlier on the corridor. He took the easy way out, with the pills and obviously the bourbon. But she says, we just keep going. This is a parallel to Bill and Frank where, they go out together. We just go out, we stay together. And like, we don't quit is what she says. We just lay in this and we just turn together. And that is a parallel to Bill and Frank. That's kind of what they stuck together for all that they weren't going to turn, but they ended their narratives together. And I think that's what they were saying here. Like, she even says maybe it's poetic and shit to lose our minds together. And that is a mirroring of what like Bill and Frank did as well, which is beautiful. And like Ellie straight away is just like option 3, like what else can we do? And she just says, I'm sorry. and like they just cry together. Just beautiful, beautiful acting, like a gut punch as well. The fact that as the viewer, we know that Ellie's going to survive and we know that Riley's going to turn, just gorgeous. We think back as well when Ellie had that conversation when she said, "This isn't the first time I've had to kill someone. This is show, don't tell. Like we don't need Ellie to say, so therefore I had to kill my best friend because she turned and I didn't. We know what this means now. When Ellie says, I've had to kill somebody, before, this isn't my first time. And especially somebody that you absolutely love. Like, when Tess was bitten, she took that option away from Joel. She was like, you take Ellie, you go. I'm going to do something. I'm going to do something heroic. I'm going to end, she chose to end her own life in a really big, heroic way. Joel hasn't had to do that. Of course, he had Sarah taken away from him, but not to the point of watching someone turn and then having to kill them. And that's what Ellie meant by that line. And that was just, when that comes full circle like that, when you realize the weight of this relationship and her having to say goodbye to somebody like that, what that meant in her having to take out Riley, beautiful.
Yeah. Like I said in the beginning, this really contextualizes Ellie.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes so much sense. And it irritated me that everyone was like, this is a filler episode.
Ugh.
There's only one infected. I'm like, are you 5 years old?
Exactly.
Are you Are you 5 years old?
Mm-hmm.
You need it to be cut and dry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there needs to be a lot of infected people. Like, how many zombie tropes have there been across the history of the humanity at this point?
Yeah.
This is more nuanced. It's more emotional, and we have spoken about this, but The Last of Us, what does that title even mean? The last of what's left of humanity. And that also speaks to what we carry with us. And this is what Ellie is carrying with herself through the entirety of her experience. And it obviously contextualizes her desire to save Joel and not leave.
Yeah.
I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was really great.
Especially like as well when we come back to, after that scene, we then come back to that final moment when Ellie finds like the thread from upstairs, then runs down, and just her like, literally like needle and thread, like basically sewing Joel's like wound back up. And again, like, the pain and what that means, but also, she's willing to do that to save the person that means so much to her. There is that kind of that when you're watching as the viewer, you kind of, we know she's not going to leave him, but, people that are new to the series could be watching thinking, when she goes upstairs, is she going to leave? Is she going to take off? Is she just going to leave him there? Because she does pull like the frame in front of the doorway. But then that coming back, of course she was never going to leave Joel. He means too much to her. She knows what loss feels like. When we look back at that episode when she says, I've lost people too, this is what she's talking about. Of course she was never going to leave him because, in that argument, she says, you're the only one that's ever given a shit about me and hasn't left. That's why it means so much to her because she knows about having that relationship with somebody who gives a shit about you. Riley was going to stay with her. And then Ellie had to do what she had to do because Riley was going to turn. It's just so poetically beautiful. And yeah, that brings us to the end, Joey.
I love this episode so much.
Same.
And I love even that last bit you just said, that idea of like, what is Ellie going to do? I mean, this episode was such a really fun moment where we got to see into the character of Ellie. And I think that Ellie is the audience's vantage point into the show, which alludes to the idea of like Ellie is kind of given choices. And we are then tasked with the idea of like, what would we do as an audience when Ellie's about to make a choice? And that almost feels like we're like playing the character. It almost feels like a game, which I think is really cute and really fun. And I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it feels that way to me. I love this episode so much. Next to episode 3, it was my absolute favorite.
Yeah. It was beautiful. I think for me, like kind of like episode 3, like I so love that it's removed from the main narrative in a purposeful way that, we are learning so much more about this character. The Last of Us is about Joel and Ellie. We learn about Joel kind of in drips and drabs all the way through. We learn a lot about Joel, to be honest, through other characters, kind of through the evolution of what we see happen with Joel as well. Especially episode 1 is very Joel centric. But this episode is so warranted for learning about Ellie. And as I said to you right at the beginning of this podcast recording, watching this episode, then going back and starting The Last of Us again and watching those episodes again, you understand Ellie so much more as a character in a completely different way because of this episode. And if that doesn't highlight its importance enough, of what's important in The Last of Us, of getting to know these characters, as you said, the last of humanity, lose now humanity, all of these themes that we've explored in these 7 episodes up until now, everything comes full circle here. and it's beautifully done. And the last two episodes are products of this episode because we understand the characters more. We really get to know Joel a lot more. We obviously understand Ellie in a much denser, much like more critical way as well. And the last two episodes, especially the next episode as well with Ellie, which is very Ellie centric, is justified by getting to know her in this episode. It's beautifully crafted, a wonderful told story, and fabulous.
Yeah, and I thought it was very strategically placed.
Yeah.
Episodes 3 and 7 are the ones that cut through the action, and episodes 4 and 5 are kind of one episode together, just, over the course of 2 hours.
Yeah.
So I think it paces the season really well. If there are going to be episodes that an audience consider filler, quote unquote, this would be the time to put it in there because it creates more of an ebb and a flow relationship instead of just like one thing after another, which is like, I don't know, there is an artistry to that to me. It's just very like, here, 1 + 1 = 2. It's just kind of boring. I think this, and then to introduce the next episodes, Ellie's decisions, behaviors, particularly the next episode.
Oh yeah.
I thought it was such a nice place to pull Ellie, her behavior seeking to save Joel, and then all of her actions that she does in the very Ellie centric episode that is episode 8.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So yeah, Joey, what would you rank? What would you give this out of 10 as your episode, Mark?
Oh, I'm giving it a 10.
It's full 10. Yeah.
Full 10.
Yeah.
I thought 9 for a second. I was like, no, I love this episode. I'm giving it a 10.
Yeah.
I thought it was beautiful.
Agreed. I always tend to do that as well, where I have a ranking, and then I think when talking about it with somebody really kind of brings it up because you further highlight how great this episode truly is. I had 9 out of 10 written down initially, but I think there's so much good in this episode, and like obviously a lot of what you and I have spoken about, and especially finishing off the entire series as well. The importance of this episode with Ellie makes it a 10, hands down. It's just beautifully done. And yeah, it just leads really nicely into the next episode. As we said, a very Ellie-centric episode. One of my favorites, I think, from the season, just for like everything that Ellie goes through, everything she's learned, all of the payoffs. I'm excited to cover it with you.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're kind of getting through them, Joey. That's our coverage of episode 7 of The Last of Us, which again, a solid episode. We've got 2 more left, and then we've done the whole season. Isn't that wild?
Really, really, really crazy.
I know, right? But again, thank you so much, Joey, for covering this. This has been fantastic. Another solid episode. And then, as I said, 2 more episodes, like we're nearly done. This is bananas. But before we go, please tell everybody, Joey, where they can find you on the internet.
The internet, hard R. You can find my personal pages at Joey Dean Official, particularly TikTok and Instagram. And you can listen to my band's music, my band King Vagabond, on Spotify and all other streaming platforms. And you can follow us on any platform at The King Vagabond.
There you go. So as I always say this, go and check them out because the music is good, man. If you want to follow the podcast, obviously every single episode that we do is put onto my YouTube page. So if you do just want to watch us as well, chat about it. We're very animated. We're very fun. You can come and do that on there. But as well, we are available on all podcast platforms as well to listen to. So you can check us out on there. If you want to follow the page on socials, it's Last Week on Pod. If you type that in on Instagram and Twitter, you'll find us on there. And if you do want to follow me personally, I am at Straughan87 on Twitter and on Instagram. So come and say hello to me on there. So thank you again, Joey. I really loved doing this one. This was a fantastic episode again. And I'm really pumped. We're moving really close to the final now. 2 solid episodes coming up, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yes. Thank you so much, Adam, for having me. It's really, it's such a nice opportunity to flex muscles I don't often flex, but I want to, just to really like take a fine-tooth comb to one of my favorite games and shows ever.
Yeah, big same. I can talk about, stuff like this until I'm dead. Like, I love it. I love it so much. It's a passion project right here. Yes. All right, everybody. Until next time, take care.
Bye.